So remember recently, Humza Yousaf had said, right, I will stand down as the First Minister as soon as somebody takes my place, blah, blah, blah. Remember, this was after apparently firing Patrick Harvey and co. In previous days. But, as I said in a video recently, look, nothing changes. There's a wee mix around and all the rest of it. The names may change, some of them, but the agendas roll on. And the Greens are still very much, because remember, the emphasis over the last few days has been, well, now the SNP's in a minority government, so they need to go to the Greens all the more. Look, nothing changes. The SNP weren't really fired, were they? The agendas roll on. And then they back. You say, why? Why would we look to have, for example, an election? I mean, that's only just going to confuse things, and we've got so many agendas to push through. We can't have the public getting involved in that.
Vote of no confidence in the First Minister personally would have been performative and petty, and I welcome the fact that it's been withdrawn. But a vote of no confidence in the Scottish Government as a whole, this proposal betrays the true motives of others. Chaos for the sake of chaos. Let's just consider what would happen if it passed. Let's just consider what would happen if it passed. A month to seek another government, then an election around the time that voters around the country were heading off on their summer holidays.
Oh, how inconvenient. Oh, come on, seriously. Yeah, I think an awful lot of people in Scotland would be well up for putting their input into what's going on just now. But no, we can't have that. They'll be too focused on their holidays.
A new government formed perhaps by August, leaving, if members will permit another viewpoint to be heard, leaving just a little more than a year and a half until the legally required dissolution for the 2026 election. And in that time,
we've got so many agendas to push through.
What would happen to the legislation that's urgently needed? A housing bill's just been introduced with measures on homelessness prevention and long-term rent controls. We've a need for a climate reset following the admission that Scotland is years behind where we should be on emission cuts. Or one of the few areas of climate policy that's been praised in the last couple of years, the Heat in Buildings programme, which needs legislation soon if it's going to be completed in time to accelerate the emission cuts from a previously...
Remember, every single aspect of this is to native Scottish, their detriment. That's basically it. They're dragging you out your cars, kicking and screaming, even although it's the 20 is plenty has failed massively in Wales. They're still pushing it out. You're now starting to see stories about cyclists running over people at 29 miles an hour. We need to look at and validation of this 20 mile per hour limit. It's by the day, the input from the think tanks is enormous. Enormous. But the last thing they want is the input from the public about what they see going on around them. Uncontrolled immigration. The cost of rent's going through the roof because, well, it's a simple aspect of there's not a lot of properties available because they keep going towards agendas. Oh, Ahmed and co needs to get in here because they're all brain surgeons. It turns out they're not the case, but they get so much money and so much help. Meanwhile, so many native people in Scotland and England, etc., are absolutely struggling, are treated like scum.
Neglected sector. All of this and much, much more would be delayed, and then after less than 2 years, yet another government, potentially with a different policy agenda altogether. Presiding Officer, fixed...
Basically, he's saying, we need to get these policies through, we need to get this legislation through, blah, 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 before the public has a chance to put its input into this. Yeah, because an awful lot of people, even SNP supporters, are less than happy with what they're seeing going on. The hate crime bill, the LGBT X, Y, and Z in primary schools, etc. Yeah, the named person scheme, various other things. Absolutely to humanity's detriment, based on agenda merchants like him and so many others.
Term parliaments are intended to give stability, And they have done so in contrast with more than a decade of chaos in Westminster politics. It should be clear to everyone that both Labour and the Conservatives don't actually want stable self-government for Scotland. Greens do. Now, we already had the best option, a stable, progressive, pro-independence majority government, and I regret...
I mean, there's no point of independence when what you want to do, apparently, is become part of the EU, and more than that, to be involved in and absolutely immersed in the UN. Everything you see the SNP and the Greens implement is based on United Nations policy. They're not nationalists. They're internationalists. We're in one world government. What you're seeing is the fine-tuning of it. Well, nobody's mentioning the fact that you have taxation without representation. They're not working for you. That's absolutely the case. It's clearly the case.
That it hasn't been allowed to continue. The government will no longer be a majority government. But minority government can work. It's happened before, and it can happen again. It's not beyond the ability of any political party in this chamber to work constructively in that.
So remember, apparently on the surface, Humza Yousaf sacked these people because their policies was affecting the voter aspect or the potential popularity of the SNP. And then, once they apparently fire them, they're more dependent than ever on them because they're in minority government. Do you see the ruse? Do you see the Shakespearean theatre that is being played out before you? It's unbelievable. It's unbelievably condescending, to say the least. It's fuckery on steroids, but they're shameless. They have a view of the world, and more importantly, and more especially, of the public, that they are nothing but cattle.
Context, if they choose to. But a minority government must reach out and bring together a majority in Parliament. And for that to happen, it will need to remain a progressive government. A reset on climate, an acceleration of emission cuts. Not
a reset on climate. Well, what fucking nonsense are we talking about here? They're literally building something like a power station a week in China. Meanwhile, Scotland has never had less industrial aspects than it does now. Seriously. Let me remind people that something like just over 100 years ago, the #1 shipbuilding country in the world, would you believe, at one stage was Scotland? Yeah. We were lucky if we can build a ferry about, what, apparently 3 or 4 times the cost. Seriously. Deliberate destruction of skill bases, so much knowledge, all the rest of it based on agendas, and the very fact that we are absolutely in world government. Why would you deindustrialize your own country to the point that you are so dependent on nations that are, let's face it, by and large communist? Most of our goods come from China. It's a communist dictatorship, yeah? When you look into the background of it, it was set up by banks and Wall Street. I mean, you look at Anthony C. Sutton and think tanks. Seriously, yeah? But here we are.
Defeatism, a bold commitment to equality, not a shabby compromise with the nasty, divisive culture war mentality that we see from elsewhere, and continued redistribution, which will be all the more...
Redistribution? I mean, how communistic do we get?
More important if an incoming UK Labour government carries out its threat to stick to Tory fiscal rules.
I mean, even when they're talking about housing policies, that's not for the locals. That's not for native locals. No. That's to absorb the dinky surfers and so much more. Seriously, they've told you, hey, our solution to declining population, and we'll not look into why the population is declining. No, let's not do that. Is to have uncontrolled immigration of people from other nations that don't share our values, don't actually like us much, and are here for the beer in the form of much pennies, because they get to the front of the queue for everything.
Meaning even more austerity. That's the progressive agenda, which is still capable of providing stable government for Scotland, instead of the chaos that the Labour motion seeks.
Anyway, as the Shakespearean theatre continues, Another one of Resisting the Lies videos with the title, Should There Now Be an Election in Scotland? Think about this.
SNP government, 14 years, of course, of the Tory government at Westminster, and a desire for that change. What we're going to see now is a debate internally in the SNP for the next 5 weeks, where they're going to talk to themselves. And we've just had that play out, talking there about independence strategy rather than talking about...
I mean, remember, she apparently, well, I've had enough of the SNP and goes to Alba. But they're all in the same underling occult networks. That's it. Seriously. But wearing suits today.
About what Scotland really needs. And of course, it was Nicola Sturgeon who said that there shouldn't be a revolving door at the top of government when she referred to the Tories' chaos and the number of prime ministers they've had. We're now going to have 3 first ministers within almost a year. And I think, how can that be the same? How can that not be the same? And it's clear that people need to have their say, and we need to have change.
Thank you. Man in the blue shirt.
We need to have change. Name the country and you hear this, Pesh. What change? There's constant change. And none of it's for the better.
At the very back.
Whoever becomes the leader of the SNP and our new First Minister, he knows, or they know, that they're going to be out of a job in a few months' time when there's a general election, when they get absolutely hammered by Labour.
Yeah, but that's why they're not going for a general election, because that way timetables will slow down. They'll not stop, but they'll slow down, and they don't want that.
Neil has stated there that Parliament has confidence in the government, but I would suggest to you that the public has absolutely no confidence in the government, absolutely no confidence, and there's been no competence.
Man with the glasses in the middle here.
As we're moving into the new election for the SNP party leader, can I ask Neil, does he still echo the SNP comments for a while back that when the Conservatives elected 2 Prime Ministers without going to a general election, that it was an affront to democracy?
Yeah, Nicola Sturgeon said that. So why is it different?
So there are a couple of things that I would say on that. There's
That's different because we're doing it.
a different process for electing a Prime Minister in Westminster as there is for a First Minister. The Parliament in Scotland, in Holyrood, elects a First Minister. That doesn't happen at Westminster, where the leader of the largest party tends to lead that government.
See, if you just all saw them as Freemasons and other occultists, Theosophists, Humanists, the New Age movement, blah, blah, blah. If you saw them as that, you would comprehend what you're looking at. That's basically it, because remember, the biggest lie is your taxation gives you representation. They're not working for you, any of them. That's it.
Another point that I would make in terms of whether or not there should be an election now is that, of course, that would not stop, and I know colleagues will know this, that does not stop there having to be an election in 2026. So we'd see an election now, an election in 2026, and I don't think actually that is what people are looking for.
Really? Yeah, I think a lot of people would like to see that just now, because that way they would absorb all the quicker. Oh, wait, for example, say Labour got in Scotland, right? Oh, they're even worse than the SNP. No, look, doesn't matter which blooming tie they wear or, whatever colour of, emblem, logo, whatever it is, right? They're all working for this, for the same goals.
Are looking for what the gentleman at the front row asked for, which is stability. And I think, as I say, John Swinney would bring that. I believe Kate Forbes has the potential to bring that. I think we have the opportunity to take that forward. And I think it's a bit trite for colleagues across.
I'll repeat. Remember, what they realise is if there was an election, then it would slow down the rollout of the agenda. So they would rather not do that, get various things in place. And then by 2026, well, good God, if you think it's bad just now, you ain't seen nothing yet.
The panel to be suggesting that this is an issue that would have a First Minister that hasn't been elected by the public. So, of course, we've got Gordon Brown, who didn't see the mandate. But we have a situation with Henry McLeish. We have a number of different situations.
We'll get into this evening.
Well, good evening. Should the next Scottish First Minister call an immediate election and let the Scottish electorate decide who leads and govern them?
I mean, that's fair and reasonable, isn't it? But we can't have that.
Paul O'Kane.
Well, look, I think I've already outlined that, yes, I do think there has to be a democratic process. That's what today's vote of no confidence was about. It was a judgment upon this government, which I think has presided over 17 years where services have got worse. We see 1 in 6 Scots on a waiting list in the NHS, which Neil is responsible for. We see public services slashed to the bone, particularly in local councils and the police and other services. And I think there is a real appetite out there for change in our country, and people want to see a fresh start. I think the way to do that is through an election. We're obviously going to have a general election as well at a UK level, whenever the Conservatives pluck up the courage to
I'm guessing he's Labour.
call
in
that.
Scotland.
And I think that is a change moment as well, and I think what we're hearing clearly is people want to see a change moment in that, and I think Labour is offering that change.
Gary, what do you think?
Well, in simple terms, yes, and as soon as possible. Probably galloping the way I talk, I'm not from Scotland, but I've lived here for 6 years. And I can count 3 policies that the Scottish government have just plain got wrong. The named person policy.
Absolutely.
The DRS scheme.
Yep,
By the way, I did an FOI on that.
DRS, was that the deposit return scheme? You know, I mean, remember, they've put a minimum price, not once, but twice, on the minimum price of alcohol per unit, yeah? Knowing full well that people that could normally afford, for example, a beer, are turning to drugs. That's why Scotland apparently is worse in Europe as regards percentage-wise, percentile, drug deaths and all the, you know, horrible stuff that goes with that, yeah? But it doesn't stop them, because that's not what they're about. Seriously, everything they do is to the detriment of humanity.
To find out what went wrong. I couldn't get all the answers from a freedom of information.
Well, Lorna's here. We can ask her tonight.
We'll come to that, but I'm keeping to my question.
Come on.
And then we have this hate crime speech bill, which has just made Scotland the laughing stock of the world. And it's because of the government that we have. And below that is the responsibility of the electorate, us. There is a saying in life, you get what you vote for, and you get what you don't vote for. And I can't help but feeling, because of voter apathy, we've got what we've got. And I think listening to this audience tonight, they are so hungry for change. And I hear a lot of word soup about trust and about experience and about leadership, and it's got us to this. So simply call an election. Whoever is the leader of the party, call the election. Forget about Westminster. Forget about next year. Do it now.
You agree?
So I've set out why I don't believe that's the right course of action. I don't fear an election, by the way.
I don't fear one, but we don't want one.
I've been involved in 4 elections in the last
You're going to lose the next
9
one.
years.
Though. You're going to lose the next one.
I enjoy. I've not really been afforded that chance much tonight, but I don't fear an election. I think we have got a good record to take to the country.
Really, seriously. Even SNP politicians and people involved with the SNP are getting hauled off in police cars. Yeah, seriously. It's not a good look. Let's be honest. It's not a good look. And what a good track record. Really, seriously. Look, absolutely. If there was an election just now, I think it'd probably go to Labour. And you would recognise very quickly that the same shit continues, but but it would still slow the agenda down, and of course, more eyes would open and go, well, what does it really matter who's in? Yeah. So no, we'll do this theatre instead.
Whenever the general election is called, whenever a general
These people seem to want it.
election is called, and I understand the frustration that there is. Of course I do. But I think
just fucking word salad pish.
What we need right now, given what I've said around the fact that this does not change the need for a Scottish election again in 2026, I think it's important that we do have stability, that we do show leadership, not just in government, but across the Parliament, where we're now
Oh dear God! Everything they've put into policy has quite literally attacked Scottish people in so many ways. Imagine, I've said it in so many vids. Come on, Your 4-year-old child can't even go to a primary school and have any confidence about just painting and learning about maths and various things, and No, we've just got to have the entire walls covered in LGBT, X, Y, and Z propaganda, and we'll ask you about your sexuality. I mean, it's grooming on steroids. We're here. I just can't believe we're here. Seriously, just cannot believe that we're here. Yeah? And it's all about, we need to stop people being able to work. We need to stop people have confidence in having a property of their own that they can call their own, that they can use as collateral. We can't have any of that. We can't have them having their second best option as a form of asset, of motor vehicle. No, we can't have them having that. And let me repeat, we can't even have them having any confidence that whatever property, if they're lucky enough to buy one, they'll be able to afford to live in it. All that and so much more, and we'll demand that people will take vastly expensive heat pumps that cost you an arm and a leg. Let's be honest, how many people with good intentions went ahead and got these heat pumps only to find to their horror that their bills quadrupled in some cases? But we're dealing with an ideology, and the carbon they want to get rid of, well, is you.
Leading a minority, we're now living...
Here, what's going to happen? What's going to happen is that between all of you, you will do shady deals to stay in power.
Well, no, I don't think that's the case. I think what you actually get is people...
Yeah, we've already done the shady deals. What we're doing now is the theatre.
Together on areas where they agree and where they can take forward matters in the public interest. And actually, I think that is an opportunity for Parliament. And it's going to be a responsibility not just on government, but also for those of those that are sitting on the opposition benches who have not come forward of late in good faith. In good faith. No, Paul, you didn't come forward with a single idea, nor a negotiating point of the last budget round. So it's not. So there's going to be a responsibility.
In any case.
There's going to be a responsibility.
Look, let the camp guy speak.
There's going to be There's going to be a responsibility upon parties across the Parliament to come forward in good faith with ideas and policies and compromise to make sure that we can go forward in the national interest.
Well, look, I think what was interesting is Nicola Sturgeon put in one of her very rare appearances in the Scottish Parliament today, and asked by a rival broadcaster as she was leaving. She said, who would be best to be Scotland's next First Minister? And she said, whoever's best for the SNP. Not for parents, not for pupils, not for our country.
That's a very good point, that. And it could be applied to so many other parties. But yeah, it's absolutely about their party, their ideologies, their parts of the agenda, their parts in the puzzle. Meanwhile, fuck the public. Seriously.
Because the SNP, for the last 17 years, have governed in the Scottish National Party's interests, not in the national interest of the people of Scotland.
Because they're internationalists. Remember, Nicola Sturgeon at the CFR, an offshoot of the Royal Institute of International Affairs. Yes, that CFR. Yes. Nationalist.
And that is the reality. So I think people do want to be able to cast their verdict on the SNP. Sadly, that motion failed today. But actually the next general election, where in seats right across Scotland, from the north east to the south west, in seats where we're up against the SNP, it's only the Scottish Conservatives that can beat them. We did that in a by-election in Arbroath last week, where our vote was up 10%, and the SNP vote was down 8%. We need to get the SNP out in seats across Scotland. Removing Humza Yousaf was a very good start, but when the general election comes, we can push forward.
Unfortunately, it wasn't. It's just replacing puppets. That's basically it. Seriously. Look at the enormity of what people pay hand over fist in taxation, directly and indirectly. And they're told they're bigots, they're homophobes, they're transphobes, they're, they're to be eradicated. Seriously. Our history, everything about us, the whole bloody works. Everything that made us successful as a species, as a race, as a society. Yeah, I mean, you look at things that the Scots did over many, many, many years. It regards innovation, invention, well, commerce, and so much more. But then you could argue the fix was right in from the start. What was it? John Todd in the 70s said that he reckoned about half of the Illuminist elite were actually Scottish or had Scottish backgrounds. That's another subject, but this theatre, that's probably another reason why so much of what you see going on is first and foremost tested out in Scotland. And remember, the largest secret society in the world, or as they say, we're not a secret society, we're a society with secrets. The largest secret society in the world is the Scottish Rite. Seriously.
Well,
And get rid of the SNP in those
people were laughing at that. So let's
People.
maybe try and find out what. Man with the beard towards the back.
Man with the beard.
On you go. Yes.
Hi. No, I think it's not fair that we are rushing to have a general election in Scotland because the next leader is not elected. In Wales, when the leader stepped down, a Labour leader came in. We had Liz Truss.
You do notice that this is happening a lot. England, Scotland, Wales, you could argue Ireland successfully. Leaders are being replaced, but without any input from the public. Come on. Do you see it?
And Rishi Sunak not elected by the electorate. So why are we gunning for the SNP only? It's our political system that is corrupt, which allows this to happen. If I have to be fair, it has to be across the board, not just Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, or England, for that matter.
Thank you. Man in the grey top on the end. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to sort of echo that, really. It's all well and good saying that you should be calling for an election, but could any of the other parties say that if they were in this situation, that they would be echoing that again?
Okay. Can I just thank you? No, hang on a second. I want to hear more audience here. Man with the glasses at the back. Yes.
Let's just gloss over that comment and ask somebody else.
How can Neil Gray sit there and say that SNP can offer stability when the power couple of the SNP, Peter Murrell and Nicola Sturgeon, are in the papers? His predecessor had to resign because of the iPad charges, which is utterly appalling. How can you offer stability when you're always in the news?
Well, I think you're talking about stability moving forward, really, aren't you, Neil Gray?
Of course.
Look, did he brown envelope him before? It's like, let me help you out here. Seriously. Holy shit. Oh, dear God. Remember, I haven't watched TV for over 20 plus years. Now, honestly, it's now probably nearer 30 than 20. And I do not feel in the slightest bit embarrassed to say that. This is truly awful. It really is. And people get glued to TV sets and watch this passion and believe it. Seriously.
And I think, you know, it has been a challenging year for the party. Of course it has. I'm not...
And by the way, how many politicians have you noticed? They all seem to be as camp as fucking knickers. I mean, what is it, low T-cell counts? I mean, what?
I don't. I'm not going to pretend that it's otherwise. But I believe there is a way forward. I believe that we can implement the manifesto upon which we were elected in 2021, the mandate that we were given, that we can focus in on the areas that people do want to see progress on the economy, on the NHS, the reform and recovery that is needed to come through.
We'll hear more in a second. What are the priorities for people here? Ash Regan, time for an election?
Well, the...
Meanwhile, you look at all this background, and it's all sort of disjointed, really. And in some respects, there's a uniformity, but you know, for the OCDs out there, that must be quite an issue. Oh dear. Meanwhile, the foreground. Look at this. Seriously. Lights, camera, action.
Public are sending the SNP a message. There's no doubt about that. Over the last...
Sending them a message, yeah. Like, for example, yeah, we'd like these fuckers out. Absolutely. And, of course, the elephant in the room is, well, why don't you ask the public about this one? You know, in the form of an election. Yeah, for an example.
year, the gap between the number of people that say they're going to vote for the SNP at the next election and the support for independence, the gap now is 15 points there. So there's a message being sent here to the SNP from the public that they're not happy about the priorities that the SNP have been focusing on. And arguably, I would say that many people vote for the SNP because they want to see progress on independence. Progress on independence is not just something you wheel out at an election to get people to vote for you. You need to show action. You need to show a plan for how you're going to get there. I'll work with anyone that can put a plan in place. But I would say...
They don't want to work with you.
Yeah, but see, all we're hearing here is about complicity. You could argue duplicity, but the point is the theatrics of, look, we all need each other because, you know, we need stability here. Even although the public have had enough of what they're seeing. Seriously, let's be honest. Come on. When your First Minister was getting her house dug up. Meanwhile, you were starting to hear about various vehicles, you know, motorhomes, fucking Jaguar I-Pace or whatever the fuck. And you know, they're obviously living very well, but at the public's expense. Seriously. And you know, certain amounts of money, you know, etc., etc. I'm trying to, you know, but because everything's always ongoing, but not a good look, really. It's not. And even when what was it, Hamza, was it a relative, you know, turns out to be, well, you know, there was another. Anyway, I'm yet again trying to, yeah. But we're dealing with the most corrupt people, really, aren't we? Who are shameless, socio-psychopathic whatevers that are very much focused on the betterment of their lives in these various occult movements at the expense of the rest of us, while masquerading as the righteous. Did I miss anything?
Well, they have an opportunity to do that. You know, I've said that I'll work with anyone to progress independence. And the other issues that I care about, that their support, you know, I think there are priorities of the public, by the way, as well, like the competence in government, like saving Scotland's only oil refinery as well. I think that's very important. So a new leader does offer the opportunity to the SNP, should they choose to take it, to work with people like myself or others across the chamber, to reset back to the priorities of the... Reset.
You keep hearing that. Reset this, reset economies, reset environmental, blah, blah, blah. It's collectivism on steroids. It's gone under so many names. Communitarianism being one of them. You know, they juggle a lot of Shakespearean theatre along with Shakespearean terms, of which those exposed to assume are the enlightened, you know, because the word salad's important, but it is collectivism on steroids and with various people in different costumes and suits and ties and whatever. And I will repeat, the background is as important as the foreground because you are being played with. Absolutely. And it only gets better in this, believe me.
People of Scotland.
Lorna Slater, people here, lots of people in this room are calling for an election. They want to have a say in it.
A cynical individual was a half-assed Diablo hand, but no, not me.
All of this. Why are they wrong?
I don't think you're wrong. Democracy always needs to work. But what I want to set out is what we've got between now and...
Think about what she's saying here, by the way.
And the election in 2026. What we have is a whole lot of legislation coming through.
Yep.
And it is things that Scotland needs. Reform of our agriculture. We cannot leave our farmers hanging. They need...
Well, no, there's a lot of farmers out there wanting to hang themselves based on the sheer stress of what they're having to comply with to make a living. And most of the public are blissfully unaware of this. Their interaction with food is usually nowadays a supermarket and not to their betterment, that's for sure. And remember what these individuals did to the drinks industry. I mean, some places literally shut down because they said, we can't factor this into our business, this deposit return scheme, and of course ties in with social credit score systems and all the rest of it, yeah. Although you will notice some corporations like Asda seem to have it already in the bag, sitting there at the front of some of their stores, ready just to start operation. So, what did they know? Seriously. And remember, although you've been taught, now that's off the table, how long before it's on again? Seriously. But, you know, she's caring about farmers when putting so much in their way.
We need to know what their new payment structure will look like. We have
You know,
to get
because, hey, we can't have cows and cattle and, you know, sheep and whatever else that have made us so successful as a country, as a society, as Great Britain and all the rest of it for quite literally hundreds of years. Because, you know, historically, living just on vegetables never works out well. Never works out well.
get that through. Land reform. We need to...
Land reform. Remember, turning over arable farming to, well, let's just have a pile of daisies in there. Seriously. Back to nature. Seriously. They're a bloody interconnected death cult. Seriously.
Reform land in Scotland. We can't allow this continue.
And remember, they've demonised plant food. CO2. Which is what? 0.04% of the atmosphere. Most people don't realise that. 0.04% of the atmosphere. It's a trace gas. And if you didn't have it, all plant life would die on Earth. And we would pretty much soon after. Be assured of that. Anyway.
Continuing ownership of most of Scotland by only a few number of people. We have to make it fair. We have to bring in better rights for tenants, rights to keep pets, rights to decorate, rent controls. We have a natural environment.
Remember, to decorate, to do this, to do that, because you need to do 24/7. That's the agenda, one of the many, that you have every day, the interaction with the state, which will allow or not allow you to do even the most mundane things based on what you think.
All of this legislation. This is the work of governance, of governing. These are the things that was only half a dozen. There's dozens of bills that are coming through. This is the work of governing, and that is what we had been doing together in the House, and what an SNP minority government would do going forward. For them. All of those bits of legislation are really important. Now, Labour are dying to have some chaos thrown into the situation. Because even with the SNP having a challenging year, Labour has not managed to pull ahead from that.
Challenging year. Oh, the very aspects of government have been hauled off in police cars. A challenging year, yeah. Their garden dug up, yeah, and let's find the motorhome, and other aspects, and so much more, yeah. Meanwhile, hate speech, and by the way, non-hate crime incidents, and if somebody perceives that you've offended them in some way, they've said some hearty words, even although to most of the population they wouldn't have been hearty words, but apparently as long as you perceive them as hearty words. But don't you worry, we've triple locked through free speech.